Stacy mentioned Josh Mote, my colleague Jared Wehde will be kind of talking through this a little bit today. Um, Really, just the goal, the idea is to educate manufacturers that there's different possibilities, there's different ways to do things. Um, a lot of times we run into manufacturers say, hey, I didn't even know this existed. So this isn't a variable commercial. This is really just kind of talking through this idea of hey, there's a different way to do it. Rather that is you building that internally. You use a organization like Veryable, or a mixture of what that might look like. Everybody, we've all experienced. You can't get enough people in your site. You can't get enough skilled people in your site. Jared, myself, we come from manufacturing, from supply chain backgrounds. We've lived on those shop floors, and we've all had those days where it's like, where are people that want to work at, right? Where are we going to find these people? How are people surviving in today's economy without working? Like, what's going on? And then you see these headlines everywhere, right? There's, as bad as it is now, it's only going to continue to get worse, and there's going to be this, massive, shortage, just massive, in specific to manufacturing. If you look kind of as a data nerd a little bit, right, you start to dive into that. What does that look like from a U.S. population historically, right? And typically, depending on the month, you're hovering somewhere in that 36 to 38% of the labor force, U.S. adults basically, that aren't participating in the workforce. So it could be students, it could be retirees, stay-at-home parents, people with super wealthy parents that they just don't need to work, whatever the case may be. And if you dive into, let's see, like, what does that look like over the manufacturing workforce over the past 25, 30 years, it's continuing to decline. So that's where a lot of these headlines are coming from, just pulling some of that data to say, hey, how's this trending? How do we think this is going to continue to trend? There's a plethora of reasons and a plethora of ideas of why this is. But enter this just-in-time workforce, this, maybe gig economy, is maybe a little bit better how some people maybe hear about this, or you've heard about it in the past. When you hear gig economy, I know the instant thought is Uber or DoorDash or one of these types of platforms. But there's millions of Americans working in the gig economy right now, whether that's in sales or marketing, web design, all of these types where they're kind of their own boss, right? They're taking projects on as they can, as they need to pay their bills or to earn that income, but they're not going somewhere 40 hours a week. As you kind of look through your traditional, from a manufacturing standpoint, ways of pulling in people for full-time, part-time, apprenticeships, second chance hirings, all of these that are all a piece of that pie, that all kind of lives under one umbrella. With this just-in-time workforce, it's a different maybe demographic that you're not able to pull through those traditional methods. You've got the retiree that has 30 years on a 5-axis CNC machine who's now bored because they're sitting at home and they want to come and give a day or two a week just to get out of the house. You have a stay-at-home parent that has 5 or 6 hours that they can come and work while their children are at school. Whatever the case may be. About 42% of people that we see in this gig economy, they work a full-time job already, and they're using this for supplemental income. So these individuals aren't going to come into to most traditional manufacturing sites on a part-time basis or on a full-time basis. And that gig economy is just growing rapidly. So it's about 3x what the traditional workforce, U.S. workforce, is growing at, and we're just seeing each year more and more people kind of going to this type of a way to work, right? Because they kind of want that freedom, whether that's because they see it on social media or wherever the case is. We're seeing this kind of continuing to trend up. And just quick glance kind of at Veryable's demographics, little under 1.5 million people that this is kind of surveyed on. But you can see they're coming from all age groups, all education backgrounds. What's interesting with kind of our demographics that we see is that it's about a 50-50 split on male to female. And traditionally in manufacturing, it's about 30% female. So there's a reason that quite a few females are kind of getting into manufacturing through this, this gig, this flex work. Gives them kind of that freedom.
All right,
Jared.
I will hop in. Good afternoon, everyone. So thanks a lot for having us today. Before we start getting into talking about just-in-time labor, the question is really, why does it even matter? So, why does it matter for us to think about the gig economy? Why does it even matter for us to think about whether or not we have enough workers? And the answer is that every business wants to win. More revenue, lower costs, more profit. We all want to have successful operations and businesses. Now, if we think about how to win, we know that success in manufacturing really boils down to two things if we're going to try to bucket them. And that's giving the customer what they want when they want it. So delighting them, making them happy with the service that they're receiving in the product. And then secondly, how do we figure out how to do that as efficiently as possible so we can, as a business, compete, gain market share, and profit while doing so? So, in simplest terms, if we think about it a different way, it's service and cost. And anyone in manufacturing knows that and is constantly trying to juggle how do we accomplish both of those if possible. But if we have to sacrifice one, which one do we sacrifice? It's not easy, especially in today's environment, where really, if you think about it, like on a personal level, everyone expects things to happen immediately or items to be delivered immediately to their doorstep in 24 hours, like in the case of Amazon and kind of what the new expectations for consumers are. There's a lot of businesses that have changed their model to adapt to kind of what we're talking about, delighting that customer. One example would be on delighting the customer would be like Nike. So on Nike's website, any of us within 5 minutes could go to their website. We could build a custom pair of shoes with all different colors, shoelaces, styles, whatever it may be. And when we click the buy button, that immediately creates a ticket in Nike's manufacturing system for that product to flow all the way through and get all the things it needs to be the finished product that we're expecting. And then immediately it gets shipped out and it's on our door how many ever days later. Another example of giving people what they want when they want it would be like Etsy and all the drop shippers and folks that are on there. Like people can custom order whatever they want. They click the button and boom, it gets sent out. Now, when we're talking about leveling the playing field and figuring out how to do that efficiently and competitively, uh, I'll provide an example of one of the businesses that we work with. They make, I'll just call it equipment assemblies, but the way they operate some parts of their business is they only commit materials, labor, space, et cetera, when they get the order. So they're a very asset light manufacturing operation, and they can scale up and down to just a few units at a time without any waste. And so those are both good examples for, you know, or all of this are they're good examples of giving the customer what they want and figuring out how to do that super efficiently. Um, in a lot of cases, realizing these two ways to win, it requires disruption. It requires innovation. And next slide, Josh. And what's kind of the number one thing that holds back innovation and disruption? And, think about it, it's the status quo, right? We're all guilty of being stuck in our old ways. Um, I know when Uber first came out and I heard about it just from a friend, that's kind of how Uber spread across the country. I thought, that doesn't sound like a very smart idea for me to just hop in a car with some random person that I've never met. I don't even know if their vehicle is safe to get me to the destination. And so it's interesting how we went from that to now we're using Uber all the time. And then the next thing is like, well, they're talking about driverless cars. And lots of folks may have a different opinion on whether or not that's going to take off or not. But again, everybody likes to have a bias towards the status quo. And frankly speaking, sometimes in the manufacturing industry, uh, as a whole, it can kind of feel like we're stuck in 1985. Like things have to be done the same way that they've always been done. There's some great things there that are golden, that will always be solid. but there's a lot of other philosophies and methods that really need a hard reset. And workforce is one of the biggest issues. So if we're really trying to identify what the underlying problem is we're trying to solve, a lot of folks will think, well, we don't have enough people, right? And Josh mentioned it in some of those earlier slides, and everybody's been feeling that the last few years. But what's more important than having enough people is having the right number of people each day. So it's not just about quantity, it's about how do you deploy that perfectly and how do you have the quality that you need. Every manufacturing facility struggles or is challenged with supply demand balancing of all their resources, right? And everyone knows labor can be a monstrous bottleneck. So here's a question. Is labor a fixed cost or is it a variable cost? Most folks want to think that it's a variable cost, and there's no pun intended here. But what we know about labor is it actually behaves more like a fixed or even a semi-fixed cost. And that makes it very difficult to deploy that perfectly to whatever demands are. Go ahead and hit the next slide. So we're going to dive in this a little bit further as we kind of build up to what we're describing just-in-time labor to be. So every manufacturing facility gets orders, right? And so let's just kind of walk through that. So the sales folks' phone ring, right? They get a call from a customer. They're excited. We just got the big order. We need 50,000 more units. They hang up the phone. They call the ops folks and say, hey, good news. We just got another order for 50,000 units. We really needed that. Oh, and by the way, can you guys get this done in the next week? And the ops guys are like, done in the next week? Like, I'm not prepared to do that. Like, I'm not staffed up for that. So the phone hangs up. They immediately call HR and say, hey, HR, I need everybody we can get. We just got this huge order. I have to get it out the door. I told you that, I knew we needed more people at the facility. I knew we should have staffed up. We should have started this like 30 or 45 days ago, right? And everybody's stuck in this reactionary approach where they know demand is lumpy. They know it's going up and down, but they really don't have a great way to predict what it's going to be. So what does everybody do? Go ahead, Josh. They staff to averages, which is the red line, right? So they're taking fixed and semi-fixed resources and they're trying to match that as perfectly as they can to what demand's going to be. Their best guess is usually wrong, just like it would be for anybody, because you can't predict the future. And so they end up not being able to match their demand on a daily basis or a weekly basis if they're doing a little bit of if they have a little bit of leeway in their lead time, or a monthly basis, whatever it may be. If you think about, I'll go back one slide still, Josh, sorry. One thing I'll say here. So I talked about fixed and semi-fixed cost. It's our view that most full-time labor really behaves like a fixed cost. So you're trying to layer that in there. Some folks will rely on temp agencies, and we're not here to bash temp agencies. They have their place and they meet a certain need. But we think temp agencies and temp labor, traditional model, is more like a semi-fixed cost. So it's not easy to scale up and down on a daily basis, both from a quantity and a quality perspective. So that makes it difficult because you're trying to layer in these costs and then you're stuck with them and you can't scale down or up as needed. Now, what happens when you can't scale down or scale up is that you end up overstaffed. So your productivity metrics for the day are going to be shot because you have too many people there compared to units produced. Or if you're understaffed, everyone's hair's on fire, service is at risk, and likely you're going to try to catch up by blasting overtime hours, which are expensive. They push up your cost per unit, but they also run the risk of burning folks out. So this is the 1985 model. This is the model that's difficult. We're going to flip to the next slide, which is our model that we work with our partners to implement. And this is the true just-in-time labor model. So what we're doing is we're focusing on what we'll call the micro demand curve, right? That up and down, that there's many surges and drop-offs that happen. And we're saying, how do we develop a labor strategy that allows us to match that curve perfectly? We call it bending the labor curve. The way we do that is we have to find the perfect balance between our fixed, our semi-fixed, and our on-demand or variable costs, right? And what that usually amounts to is being a lot leaner and having a lot lower amount of fixed costs. And you can see that down there in gray where it says full-time and temp employees. And then the green on here is where we are saying if you had a labor resource that you could deploy instantaneously, sometimes same day, it'd be real easy to just project out, okay, the plant needs to operate with 213 people today. So I'm going to make sure that I have 213 people here, not 240 or not, 180, whatever that is. I want to make sure they have the right amount. Folks that are on the call right now or listen to this later, you may think that this is impossible, but it's not. It's totally possible with the right approach. We've been doing this with thousands of businesses, and we'll talk more about that here in a minute. All right, so I wanted to go through a working example just about like how we help our businesses to like calculate the value in a program like this. So we're going to just kind of throw out an example of a manufacturing facility, and then I'm going to pull up a spreadsheet that's like a value calculator that kind of walks through some of the logic and what we think the cost savings would be for this facility. So the facility is, they manufacture, we'll call it something made out of plastic, even though the picture may not look like that. There's 250 people in the facility. Their daily demand variation is plus or minus 15%. They have a really quick turnaround on their product. So when customers call, in most cases, they have the molds or the dies ready, and they're immediately trying to respond and get the product out the door. So that's really important for them to compete. They pay their workers $20 an hour. The workers themselves are expected to make about 300 units a day, have about 50 million in sales annually with the profit margin of 20%, and they usually make about $10 million a year. Josh, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if I can grab it from you. Josh, can you see this?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Okay. So this is just a demand volatility savings worksheet that we put together, and I'm happy to send this out to all the guests on the call. And then if anyone else would like to have it, feel free to hit me up or feel free to shoot this around. We share this freely. But what we did here is we just put a model together. It's real straightforward. We built a model that shows demand volatility over time. So that's the blue line. We just plugged in 15% in there, and that's going to spit this out. On the average daily staff, we assumed that the plant was previously just staffing to a daily average. So they said, yeah, we always need 250 people at our facility. That's the orange line, right? So what we're doing is we're comparing the facility's average staff to their actual real demand on a daily basis, which goes up and down. That creates situations where understaffing or overstaffing occur, kind of like what we talked about earlier. On the days that understaffing is projected, we would assume that the business would probably try to run overtime to catch up, and that costs money, extra money. And when the facility is going to be overstaffed, then we're assuming that they're taking a hit to their productivity and they basically have wasted labor hours within their operation. If we look down here below, here's the quick calcs. Again, this isn't rocket science. Most of the folks on the call could put this spreadsheet together pretty easily. But the impact is real. It's huge. So on an annualized basis, just eliminating overstaffing and understaffing at the facility is worth almost $900,000 a year. Overtime is typically a cost that's easy to see because it shows up and you're running a report. But overstaffing is sometimes that hidden cost that happens a lot of times at both manufacturing and distribution facilities where people kind of just get okay with it, but it's really costly. On a percentage basis, that would help to reduce the unit cost by 6% just by being able to flex up and down easily by 15% on headcount. There, based on this model, the standard labor cost per unit was originally 53 cents, and just this procedure alone on being able to do this would save about 3 cents. If you think about the numbers I shared before, they're selling those units for about $2 a pop. And so it's a pretty significant impact, especially if you go back to the $10 million in net income a year. I mean, we have a way that we can help businesses increase their profitability significantly. All right, Josh, you want to take back over on the slides? I'll stop sharing.
Yeah. So, what does this look like there in the state of Missouri? Just a quick look at our Kansas City and St. Louis markets. There's tens of thousands of individuals that are currently working in this just-in-time in manufacturing around the state. Population density, what we have seen doesn't necessarily, that's not really a driver. So where obviously it's easier with more people and you've already got that pool built out, even if you're a couple of hours from one of the main hubs, it's something that we've seen built in very rural areas. A lot of times when we start talking through this and businesses kind of see what this looks like, it's, hey, that's a people grab, right? I can go get as many people as I need. And that's true, right? You can. But what we saw through the last, couple of years through COVID, all of that, is this is something that can be deployed and maybe is more valuable even when the economy or the business is facing kind of a downturn. When this is rolled out correctly, it's implemented into these manufacturing sites, with the right leadership. This prevents layoffs. This prevents missed projects. That's where you can really start to drive a lot of value. And what we see is a kind of a stronger full-time employee retention because they're not constantly worried about getting laid off, and kind of gives them a little bit more free time if they're not forced into overtime when things are going well. For Veryable itself, just a quick note on if it is something that you're interested in learning about, obviously there's different ways that you could do this, right? If it's trying to build something out yourself internally, if it's trying to find maybe some local manufacturers that you kind of want to build this out with, whatever the case may be. Veryable is a couple of parts where we do have that marketplace already established, obviously in the state. But we're a software company. We're not a staffing agency. You're not going to call us and say, hey Josh, I need 12 people tomorrow. Like, that's awesome, I'll teach you how to use the platform, but teach a man how to fish type of thing. And then out of the work that we've done with our manufacturers, something that we rolled out probably 18 months ago is this workforce management tool that kind of lives on its own. So this is a little bit more on the HR side, where this will tie in your full-time, your part-time, your variable operators if you decide to use the marketplace. And this is really kind of a way to maximize your hours inside your facility. And maybe you need 6 people on the paint line on first shift, but you need 8 people on paint line tomorrow, right? And where can you kind of plug and play those individuals? This will take all of those calculations off of your plate. And then ideally, being able to combine them together would be kind of the one-stop shop where, for some businesses, the marketplace works great, but they don't need WFM. For others, they need that workforce management tool, but they don't need the marketplace. So every business uses this different, and we're continuing to kind of build these tools out surrounding around manufacturing. And then just a quick plug that we are, 43 markets strong right now. And the majority of our business, our manufacturers have come through, manufacturers that recommend us to their sister companies. They recommend us to their supplier base or their customer base. So we are always thankful for any of those types of introductions as well. And that's all that we have. If you do have questions, we're happy to hang on and chat through them.
Josh, I got a question. There's a lot of companies that struggle as far as they can't afford to engineer full time or, maybe a skilled trade. What are the typical skills or the type of employees that you could find with Variable on the app? I mean, is it just assembly line workers, or could you hire an engineer or something to help fix a need throughout the year?
Yeah, great question. So we have 10 kind of main skill sets, whether that's assembly, forklift, general laborers, and then there's subsets in there. So we do get skills from the, standpoint of different welders, machine operators. From an engineering standpoint, we don't really get into the white collar. It is a little bit more blue collar, but you can get obviously the higher skill depending on what you're looking for.
Okay. And I was just curious, with the on demand, do employers generally give any kind of benefits to these individuals? Or are they considered part-time where they don't get benefits?
Yeah, so these are all 1099 contractors. Now they do have through Veryable, there's different benefits and stuff that we get from like group rates. So those are things that the operators have access to because of our mass numbers of operators, right? It's kind of like a group rates on a lot of those. But yeah, for the company itself, they're just 1099. So all of that, the liability insurance and stuff, typically that falls through with Veryable.
Okay, so I mean, there's probably even a greater savings that maybe companies aren't thinking about. And we just actually did a survey with 250 manufacturers throughout the state, and the top 5 issues is kind of related to what you're talking about: is finding and attracting employees, keeping employees, cost of health care coverage, and cost of employees' salaries. And then also, even I think this fits pretty good, as economic and global uncertainty is with the on demand. So all 5 of those are kind of hit exactly what you're talking about with variable product and services of on-demand labor. So,
Yeah. I mean, we find, and obviously it's up to the business on the pay side of things, but even if they pay the same rate, the same hourly rate, the cost for variable is less than what a, fully burdened, full-time employee would cost by the time they're paying out those insurance and all of those. So there is obviously a cost savings there. But again, it's when we can get in and kind of see, hey, what are the KPIs that we're trying to drive? That's where we can really kind of show those kind of that cost out for these manufacturers.
all right. So anybody have any questions, comments for Variable? I mean, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So we've talked about a couple different clients that you guys have worked out a program with. Does this work well for the companies that are experiencing a lot of call-ins? I mean, can you guys react quickly if somebody said, okay, we got 3 people call in, the flu's going around, and they would be able to react that quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So now there's a little bit of a process of like building out their labor pool, right? I mean, if depending on what the role is, but we actually have a large engine manufacturer in the U.S. that is using it a lot for that specific reason. So they are using the marketplace to bring in some a small amount of the on-demand labor, just with what their fluctuations are. But they're a large union site with tens of thousands of employees. So they use this as a full-time or as a benefit to their full-time employees to say, hey, if you need to take off to go to your kid's game, or you have a doctor's appointment, or you're sick, as long as you can let us know within so many hours and we can backfill that with a variable operator, then it's not going to count against you and get the point system and all of that. So this is something that their team's actually pushing out to their new hires as a perk to come and work for them.
Thank you.
Yeah. Typically, it's around 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours is what we kind of coach on the postings as they build out kind of this favorites, whatever, which is getting a little bit more into the variable details themselves. But A lot of times it's same day. We see a lot of the, within 2 to 3 hours for that exact reason. So-and-so didn't show up today. We need to backfill these roles. We'll have them in here before lunchtime.
And I might add one thing to that in terms of the responsiveness. So we have a business here locally. This one's actually a distribution company, but the principle's still the same. But they really try to look at how their labor plan comes together at certain points throughout the day. And they're actually deploying labor in smaller blocks than 8 hours. So like 4 hours at a time. So all of their orders have to be out the door at the end of the day. And so what they'll do is, as orders come in the morning, they have a tie to e-commerce. If they start looking like they're going to have orders at risk, because they're getting a lot of orders that are coming through early, they'll layer in a few like 4 or 5 hour shifts later in the day to make sure that everything gets onto the UPS truck. So kind of your point about, or the question about responsiveness and is that possible? It's totally possible. And in fact, we highly encourage folks to be as precise as they can with a few hours here, a few hours there, matching it perfectly to what the need is. Because the alternative to that is so many folks will just overstaff instead, because they're like, I have to make sure that my on-time delivery is good. I have to make sure the orders get out the door. I have to make sure stuff gets shipped, whatever it may be. And so they'll just overstaff as kind of like a backup, or to make sure that they're going to get it done. So this gives businesses a way to be lean, but also be sure that they're going to be able to get the job done each day, no matter if there's call-offs or if orders surge or whatever it may be. Yep.
I know one question that a lot of manufacturers might ask is what do you see, I guess, is how do manufacturers deal with drug testing or verifying with these kind of employees that are coming in on a on-demand basis? How does companies deal with that, or what's the approach?
You want me to get it, Josh? Okay. Yeah. So with drug testing, we really try to work with the businesses to understand, okay, really what is the goal with the drug testing, and that's to prevent substance abuse at the facility and have people impaired while they're working. In a lot of cases, we're able to work with businesses to come up with an approach that doesn't even require drug testing, because in many cases, a pre-employment drug screen is that effective in preventing substance abuse at the facility. So it depends on the situation, though. Some folks have a regulatory requirement for that, and so there's ways to implement a system in that way. Normally, it's unique and custom to each business. The thing that we've seen be the most effective is just continual monitoring of the operators, just by talking to them and checking in with them at the beginning of each shift. Based on a 1099 model, the operators, if they're not on point, if for some reason they're not performing duties safely, or if there's a concern, they can be dismissed for the day since they are a contractor. And so a lot of the businesses, because of that, feel pretty comfortable as they get to know the operators. And if there is an issue, they're able to send that operator away and simply block them so they don't have to work with them again. So each situation can be unique, but in most cases, we're able to develop a program that in the end is more effective than just a one-time snapshot pre-employment test for somebody who might be working with that business for multiple years.
Okay. Kind of semi-related to that is, a lot of companies or manufacturers in the state are aerospace, are kind of Department of Defense related, and then they require ITAR compliance. And is that done on the variable side, or is that done whenever they bring them in? Is there any way for a manufacturer to be able to go show me all the ITAR or U.S. citizens that I can pull from, or how does that work with compliance related stuff?
Yeah, sure. I'll take this one, Josh. So, again, each situation is unique. If there's a certain application process or a certain certification that's needed, a lot of the businesses will just list that in the op description. So it'll be clear right at the top that says you must have this certification in order to participate, and on these ops, and we just call work opportunities ops for short. Sorry, I'm throwing out terms there. So that's a possibility. The other possibility for getting operators, the workers, the certifications they need is to have like an orientation class where they come in and they potentially go through that process, whatever it may be. We'll see stuff like that sometimes, like on the food side, where folks need to have certain training or certifications before they begin work. So in a lot of cases, it's not much different than what folks would do on a full-time basis. We only coach the businesses, though, to try to be as efficient as possible, or maybe a good way to think about it is the to credential stack. So if somebody's coming into a facility and all they're going to be doing that day is building cardboard boxes, well, then they probably don't need the full training at the facility or full certification. They could probably just go through something that's condensed, that's specific to that task at hand that day. So it just really depends. I know the regulatory environment can be touchy because a lot of that stuff is inflexible. But in terms of training and other certifications, if there's a will, there's a way. And for most businesses, once they realize the value of what the platform can provide and the just-in-time labor model can provide, then we'll work with them to figure it out. And that's really what Veryable, like what we're here for, like why, I exist and the other folks on the Veryable team exist within the markets, is to help businesses kind of work through whatever processes they may have and share some insight on what we've seen that's worked well at other businesses. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but ultimately, either we'll put it as a requirement in order to participate, or we'll figure out how to get those operators the training that they need.
All right. Appreciate the answer for that. Any other questions, comments? Feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Well, with that, if there is any other questions or comments, thank you guys from Veryable and everybody that attended. We appreciate it. If you do look in the chat, I kind of just threw in there some links to Missouri Enterprise website, Veryable website, and also, if you haven't seen it yet, our results of our manufacturing survey. So you can go and download the report of all the data there to look at the report on what manufacturers are facing this year and how they're addressing some of the issues that we just talked about. So appreciate everybody attending today, and hope that you can attend also anything in the future that we hold. Just next week, just to let everybody know, November 13th, we're holding a SESME or Smart Manufacturing Conference in Washington, Missouri at Melton Machine Controls Company. So if you have a chance, sign up for that on our website. It's no cost. And if you want to learn smart manufacturing. So I appreciate everybody's time today, and thank you for attending.
Thank you all.
Thank you.